everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lifting. Today is, what is today?
12/3.
December 3rd, 2022. And we are really happy to have this discussion with you guys. So we want to thank you for being here with us. We want to thank those people that have followed us all of these years since January of 2017 when we started this. Big shout out. And we hope, again, as always, that you find these conversations interesting. So today's show is going to be a continuation of something that was brought up recently that many of you may have already seen. The show that was out when Chris and Sean Bond were talking. And it was something that was brought up that kind of reminded us, we probably should have this discussion a little bit more in depth. So what Chris is planning on doing is he's just going to put the link to that Sean Bond episode at the bottom, just in case you haven't heard it yet. But what the guys did in this is they were talking about a lot of things, but they were also talking about each other and things they were finding and maybe helping each other out a little bit. And, one of the things that Sean was talking to Chris about are some things, because they've known each other for a while, that he's seen and he looks at as far as he just kind of referred to it as good, meaning progress, meaning areas of growth that Chris has gone through, and then areas of maybe still areas of needing to work on. He did refer to that as negative, but it's the areas still need to work on. So one of the areas had to do with a type of influencing that could occur. And he was explaining to Chris that about 90% of his problem that still remains, not that he's in problems 90% of the time, don't think that, I'm just saying 90% of what is still to be worked on had to do with issues related to the ego. Now, when I first will say that to you, automatically in a lot of your minds, you're going to have an immediate response of what you feel. If I use the word ego and having a problem with it, what that actually means. It may not actually mean that. So we want to have a discussion today about the totality of the ego and kind of how it works and how vulnerabilities can come in and then influencing can come in behind that. So we want to, again, elongate this because this is probably a conversation that a lot of people will get something to be able to reflect out personally and then be able to hopefully mull it around and then maybe grow and maybe, we call it shutting some of the back doors, be able to shut some of the back doors of maybe where vulnerabilities tend to come in. So today's show is, again, about the ego.
The pitfalls.
The pitfalls of the ego will be the actual title to this. So what I want to do, of course, this is a lifting show, so we always start out with an affirmation and blessing. So I want to do an extended version of the law of one. So we are all one. When one is harmed, all are harmed. When one is helped, all are helped. Therefore, in the name of who I am, and I am one with all there is, that only the highest good be done. I pray for you, your friends, your family, your loved ones, to let the healing energies in. Let them love you. Let them nourish you. Let them bring you to the highest good. I pray for myself, my friends, and my family. I pray for Chris, his friends, and his family to please let the healing energies in that love and nourish you and bring you to your highest good. As we open this conversation to allow for others to come in to join us, we want benevolence for our highest good. We want no conflicting agenda. We want soul family who are there supporting our growth. We want friends and people that have passed that we either remember or not remember that are there as well with no conflicting agenda, that want to support our knowledge and growth and want to love us through that. We ask for these friends and families and loved ones as they join us, and as you have family and friends and loved one who join you as you listen to this conversation, to please sweep away anything that is not for our highest good. Let the energies change to this is a free flow conversation, and that we all can feel and understand the importance of these topics and this topic in particular today. So I do that with great intention, with great benevolence for all of us and all of our highest good. I hope you do too. And so in a joint conversation where we all wish the same thing, we want to end it in agreement with so be it.
So be it. So be it. So yeah, this is actually quite interesting. You may have, if you were a Patreon member of ours, you may have seen a PowerPoint discussion that we did on the ego. So a few years ago, I believe it was. It had been on the Patreon since its beginning. And it was part of that 5-part series that we were explaining different concepts. And that conversation still holds. So I won't 100% rehash what's in there, but I will say there are updates to this particular conversation. I will rehash a little bit of what's in there. It will appear on our websites here in the not too distant future when we get some other storage issues hashed out. You will see that again in our subscription. This I promise you. But this discussion on the ego is quite prevalent because you have the New Age community that says, oh, you must rid yourself of the ego. This is not necessarily true. The ego is not only the survival instinct, but it is also latched onto that. Like, say, if you are being attacked, yes, can the fight or flight be bad if it continues? Or can you thinking you're better than somebody else be very bad? Absolutely so. But say in my work, what Sean was referring to, he said this in a private session him and I had as well, where my ego was the size of a galaxy, which it didn't mean that it didn't mean that I was better than anybody. It meant that I had to bloat myself out to be able to defend myself against any bad guys that were coming in. I had to find ways of defense. There were a couple scenes in the show Firefly years ago when one of the main characters left the show. Where she had to the companion character she had to basically get into a situation where she had to fight and find the strength to endure a battle, an actual physical battle. But then it was kind of seemed contradictory to how peaceful she normally was. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, where sometimes you have to shrink that back when it's not needed and bring it out when it is. It was a beautiful example of that. What we were talking about briefly in the older discussion was essentially the survival instinct. Without the ego, you're not really grounded here at all. So you need that. You need that side. The New Age movement wants to basically rid yourself of that. And that is wrong, because that is part of the Orion agenda at work right there. They want you to separate you from yourself, very much like they showed the New Age movement. Oh, you can't feel those emotions. They're evil. They're so evil. Wrong. Those beings are evil for trying to manipulate you on that level. This, you have to balance both mind and heart. They would have you get rid of any brain functions whatsoever, which that's wrong. The ego actually grounds you. It's a grounding element if it is used correctly. So any of the New Age movement or metaphysical people that are listening to this, this is where the manipulation began. I always heard, especially back in the 90s when this started, we were constantly hearing from fairs and all this other stuff. Oh, the ego is ego and evil. They basically equaled both of them. That is incorrect. That is so incorrect you don't even know. And to bring back a little bit of history, it was the 3-letter agencies essentially that created the New Age movement, essentially to separate people from themselves so they wouldn't come into their own grounded power of sovereignty, of both acknowledging their emotions and also acknowledging their energetic capabilities all at once, and grounded here on the earth. They did not want this because they knew they were screwed if anybody got into that level of sovereignty, meaning could stop them physically if need be, or energetically if need be, or both as one, warrior and monk. They did not want that to take place. The warrior requires the ego. The monk requires the more passive. You have to be able to interchange these things when needed. That's not a part of the conversation that has not ever been really discussed. Some people, it's either one or the other. They based it off of a biblical, uh, uh, some biblical passages. One was about basically King David, basically saying, "Oh, you can never ascend because you're a warrior." That's wrong. And also Moses defending, taking out that Egyptian guard, killing the Egyptian guard. And God goes, "Oh, no, you can never enter the promised land. You committed murder." That have and have not bullcrap drive me nuts when I heard that. And I knew it was wrong the moment I heard it. And that's what some of the Orions tried to insert in there. Oh, no, you can't be a warrior of any kind, or you won't be able to ascend. For one, there's no such thing as ascension. It's grounding and mantling of the better parts of the oversoul and the avatar here, and expanding your perspectives and your perceptions. So there's really no poof into ascension. Oh, you won't enter the promised land. Maybe I don't want to be in that promised land if those are the rules right there. So the ego is an integral part of this process that they wanted people to rip apart and rip and separate from themselves, so people wouldn't defend themselves if necessary, and they wouldn't be passive when necessary. They wouldn't be aggressive when necessary. They would just be in this weird limbo flux of God knows what. This was a form of manipulation, folks, right at its finest.
So when we talk about the ego in general, again, Chris is bringing up many examples of the what people normally think of, which is that over-bloated ego
of being better than someone,
of being better and having better skills, or having when you're with
I'm so great, type of thing.
And with what you do, I'm gonna be stronger than you, whoever
whoever the opposition is.
So that's again. And when people think, your ego is having a problem, that would be where most people's minds would actually go. But believe it or not, that's only half the pie of the conversation. Mm-hmm. So if you think, again, a bell curve, an ego in operation on a bell curve, we've only spoken of one half. What's really important probably is to make sure we have the full discussion of all of the ego and all of the potentials. Because yes, can you be so focused on something that you need to deal with, you don't see what's behind your back, and something, gets in? Sure.
There's a lot.
We're talking about that. But the same thing can happen if you float into this other side, that we need to have a conversation as well. And that other side is probably where most people are being affected. And so we want to have the totality. So again, when we just talk about the ego in general, this is a bodily function that is to, our bodies try desperately to survive. We're soul connected into it, like a battery put into something to animate it. But you have to have mechanisms in play. The soul itself, the grand soul itself, isn't walking around afraid, isn't walking around necessarily with a fear that I am going to become extinct, But when your piece of yourself comes into this body, that's not wise to bring that with you. You need something to try to help you maintain yourself in this body. So again, an ego is all about reaction and how do I deal with real or perceived threats. This is what the ego is there to help you with. So again, you could have very real threats. The one thing that people don't understand with people who do Chris's work is that their perception of what is a real threat is way bigger than normally you and I. You and I may be thinking of the cars coming down the road and hopefully it won't hit me, whereas other people in energetics are actually seeing other things coming in that could cause harm to the body as well. So our perception that is bigger. But one of the things that we talked about, when he gets that link up at all, that's very important, is that many people have actually most have not mastered the soul running the show of the body. Many people now, and it's intentional, this is part of, again, how the strategy is to break you apart, believe it or not, have the ego running things. not necessarily the soul controlling the ego, which again, if you only think the issue is related to an overbloated ego, let's say, then that gives them 50% shot of actually nailing you on other issues, even if you talk about the new age. So if you even talk about let's say the new age person who wishes to adopt that belief system, okay, do you think they get put into anxiety and fear if they feel within themselves they're drifting from it, right? That to them is a perceived threat, wouldn't it be? Altering from a belief system.
That would be a perceived threat. So in and of itself, that is an ego response.
That's an ego response, right? And so not understanding it, being in that state can potentially let something in the back door if it is consistent and persistent. It's, so what I'm trying to say is that right now, believe it or not, many people are living in ego, meaning not the overbloated ego, but again, that those survival instincts kind of ego where you're walking around, again, fear. All they talk about is New York City. Does anybody want to go there to visit and ride the subway? You're constantly being put in a state of fear of survival, right? Always having to watch your back. Always, and you don't want to talk to people, you don't want to do anything. All of this is intentional because it actually, in a sense, makes vulnerabilities. These are ego type of responses for basic survival. These fear, even staying because you're in fear, then you'll get angry. So again, what I'm talking about is, again, if you look at the chakra type energies, what people refer to as the lower chakra survival type of energies, of the basics, food, clothing, shelter, safety. These things are, considered some of the basic stuff. And if you're not really watching your energies very well, it makes it easier for something to slip in. And that is a strategy used. So, for example, if you know somebody that has, let's say, an overbloated ego at times, okay, again, for women and for people, some people can want to say their ego's overbloated when they're confident, when they're assertive and passionate over something that they feel, right? When they do these things, people can just say, well, you've got an overbloated ego because you're not being demure. You're not, and again, I hate to say this, I don't know any other way to say this, you're not being one of the sheep, right? So you can be, categorized as having overbloated egos when you're actually more balanced.
Or self-interest, something like what happened in 2020. People were accused of all that a lot when they were correct.
Right.
So, yeah.
So one of the things that, again, we are trying really hard here to take into consideration what's being said around us, to look at ourselves, to see what's going on, and to see how are things actually being affected. So one of the areas that we were reflecting on that is actually bringing this conversation up to light, because it was an interesting conversation, but I had to think, truly had to think and reflect back on all this time that I've been with Chris or whatever, and how much time have I actually seen him in an overbloated ego state. Now, obviously, I'm not around when he's doing his sessions or whatever, when actually that part of him would come out. But am I seeing this, what I would consider this, on a day-to-day basis? And I have to say no. And so then I'm like, well, we need to expand the possibilities of where the vulnerabilities could be. So one of the areas, again, had to be, consideration of, for example, for Chris, it going out even into the environment, right, amongst a lot of people. This was a huge, huge concern of yours when you were young. We joke, we say we went on a cruise. I'm like, that was interesting and probably shouldn't be done again, because here is a person with Chris's skills on his ship where he sees everything, including what's walking around with somebody or whatever, not knowing, was it his job to clear the whole damn ship? You know, and then where does he find peace amongst all of this? How do we do this? We actually carved out a little spot, you know, that we were outside in a little corner where not many people went to when the ship was moving. And we did manage, but it was an interesting dynamic of a lot of things were learned on that time. So for example, if you're really energy sensitive, and a lot of people right now are energy sensitive and they're walking out and they don't want to go out. They want to stay in their houses. Mm-hmm. They want to stay in their protected areas. Well, what happens if you go out? Normal human responses happen where you are now put into a high state of alert. You are now potentially even in a fear mode, right? Of what potentially could happen. And are you setting yourself up for a backdoor issue to potentially come in?
And now also being that energy sensitive, yes, you need to protect yourself. Will other people see your vibration? Weird or different, kind of like they're viewing you as either dark or like almost like an alien. Yes. But also the other side of the ego, like if you're like, there's confidence, and then it can go into arrogance, which then can also form some of these back doors, whereas you can get a false sense of security going into place. Oh, I can conquer this. And it's basically like you're walking naked into a nuclear reactor. You wouldn't do that. But sometimes it can drift, an enemy can drift you into that area to get you even more beat up than you normally would have been. The false sense of security, or say, you know, I even jotted this down. There has been several situations that have popped up in the past 6 months or so for myself, where my feelings just got overly hurt. And it can also make it seem like it's about you in that situation. It really was not. And are there situations where your feelings are hurt? Yeah, of course. But at the same time, it's one of those things you have to either brush it off, or it becomes a backdoor for these enemies to be able to hijack your mind if you go too far into it. And I didn't realize, and this is something Sean Bond said to me in my session with him, whereas when I was holding the shield and the sword towards the front, being extremely confident in this area, I wasn't looking behind me, and I had a bunch of back doors. And what that back door looks like to me, when I see this in a bunch of other people, I see it as a hack or some kind of like hacked space or module, whereas the enemy will create this weird holographic space that looks like almost like a hotel or a resort where people are coming in and out of different doors. That could be the same being doing that over and over again, that has like a gray that can think on multiple levels cerebrally. So they are basically, it's artificial intelligence too. Think of it as like a computer hack where they get back here. It's not physically back there, but you know exactly what I'm saying, where they're trying to get into your subconscious and get you to get your guard down, put your ego in one area and disregard the 50% of what's also going on. And the hurt feelings section was hurt feelings. The ego response is another one where if you stay lingering in that and don't move forward, that it can be used against you.
And remember, most normal people, okay, so he's talking about in battle, I'm shielding myself or whatever, but you put up a shield and sword if you're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I'm just saying, when you see shield and sword, you know, is it somebody who is confident? Is it somebody who is terrified? That protection mechanism and what we do to protect ourselves would be to do something like that. Mm-hmm. But where are you? And as much as you want to, you know, people's automatic responses or the overbloated ego situation, which allows for it, but so does the other half of a survival instinct as well. So
you begin to care more about what others think of you as well if it goes overbloated, and that can be against you as well. Right.
So I mean, I think you know, we want you guys to think about this, because again, it becomes a hook and a strategy used. And if a hook and a strategy works, until you realize what's really going on, right, they're going to use it over and over and over and over again. So if you have certain repeating patterns in your life, you really should give this a, a thought as to, is it really you? Or is, did something kind of, let's just say, take over for a moment or so, during that time? What, and we're going to bring somebody in to talk about this, but I want to say that, again, for people that are empaths and for different things like that, first of all, you could be very confused as to who am I feeling? Am I feeling myself or not feeling myself? But you can still get into some of those same concerns when you go out in public as well, because, what can I control this? Can I not control this? What's going on? So vulnerabilities can occur. I've always tried to suggest to people that, again, some of the ways that you do protect yourself seem abnormal, and they can seem, let's say, cold. They're not cold at all. What you have to do is be able to almost pull yourself out as an observer of a situation going on, where you kind of moved yourself back into a neutral place to kind of, am I going to accept what's going on as just this experience with these other people and whatever? Or am I somehow going to take something in and become vulnerable by letting my feelings get hurt, or, get into some sort of fear, or get into some sort of anger or whatever?
And so, if you have that response and you have that wound, it's obviously a wound that needs to be healed.
If you continually do that. Yeah, because it is an impediment to your growth. I will say that. Now, pulling yourself back out for a second, again, where some people, immediately can get into an argument, and other people will say, and they do it very calmly, I'm going to think about this first. We'll come back and have this conversation. Now, some people will do that and they run away and they never have a conversation. That's not an unwise response. If you need to take a little bit of time to try and reflect and basically say, there's a part of me that I'm listening to that says I should not be engaging in this right now. And I need a little bit of time and space. Again, is that unwise? Not necessarily. Now, obviously, if it's a real threat, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to have to react, and you're going to have to. But if it's one of those things in a perceived threat situation where somebody is, can be being used to gaslight, can be being used to evoke a response, can be something that is a vulnerability and they're trying to hook you. Not responding to it and not giving energies to it at that moment is a great way to deflate the whole thing. Okay, because if you don't participate in it, it can't continue. So I just, I do want us to bring somebody in, but I want to say that because, again, the point of all of this conversation is to acknowledge that these are ways that things happen, that, we're not exempt from anything. We desperately try to say that we're learning and sharing as we understand things better. We're learning and sharing to help everyone else have things to think about and ponder. Again, sorry, this is self-work. This is this kind of hard self-work. How do I not give energies to something that's going on around me to deflate it? That actually puts you more in a power control than you think. But can you do that? And then, can I keep myself from reacting in a way that allows a back door to be opened? So these are the things that you need to think about when we talk about, again, learning how to control the ego. Okay, and you control what's going on in your body rather than letting the ego control everything. Yeah, and you just are there to react to whatever the ego is saying you need to react to.
Yeah, and the triggers are usually something in the subconscious. Now, it could be like with us, SSP, it could be something from your childhood, it could be something from a past life that's in your genetic memory, that's echoing in the now. I've seen a wide variety of where some of these triggers come from. It could be something from your immediate past. It could be something from a long time ago, or something that just happened. But sometimes that's also related to the past. I had a couple incidents of three of them to be exact. I won't name these people. I won't even name the incidences. Just know in all three of these instances, there was some level of hurt there. But as the scale progressed through these three, by the time it got to the last one, or there's many before this, but these were recent, the triggers started to disappear more. And now, is this sometimes a form of targeting that sometimes people walk away from you? Yes. Also, is this a form of evolution as well, where you're becoming more mantled and more in your I am presence, and some people just can't handle that frequency? Also, yes. So that it falls into the both the good, the bad, and the good categories. But by the time it reaches this other person, I did not know I was warned about this last one actually well in advance, and I'm still. Am I mad at the fact that it took place? Yes. Was I hurt by the fact this person then accused me of what was happening? Absolutely. But at the same time, at that moment in time, it was not about myself. It was what happened to this individual. So I will only leave it there. I'm going to leave it in generalities. I'm not going to say names. These people will know whom I'm speaking of. But just know there was a trigger involved in all three of these particular instances. And now that trigger is nearly all but gone. And now, even recently, there is something that has popped up where someone, that was doing a project for me, fell ill for a period of time, which I can't fault this person over that, because I myself last year did. But at the same time, the over bloated, ego side was going, wait a minute, I paid for this. I want this done. There's an excited part of me, but there's also this other part of me going, wait a minute, how about we get this done and then you can be sick, sort of thing. And it's like, no, that's wrong. That's wrong of me to do. But at the same time, I'm also the good side of the ego is protecting the work, protecting the investment. So you see the two sides of it, even in recent times. It's not as much of a trigger as it was with these previous three, but it is shrinking. And as Sean Bond just said to me in our session, it's just you have to shrink that down when it is not supposed to be in use for that defense. It all has to work together. It can't be like on automatic. It's just like I will use one more example before I try to bring anyone in. There's a scene in the original Star Trek where when Jeffrey Hunter's Pike was captured by the Telosians, when he slams up against the window and the alien reacts. But when he elongates that anger and hatred, the alien starts to feed off of it. And they even confirm that in Discovery, where that's what the aliens were doing, essentially like the real looshing that is going on. My point is, when it was elongated, it was looshed. When it was used for what it needed to be used for in the moment, it was not looshed. It was actually an overload. It was actually a form of defense at that point. So I love that example Gene Roddenberry came up with because it works as far as looshing and the ego response. It works for both because it's the warrior side of things where you needed to know how to balance that out in order to defend, but also use it in order to defend as well. So I think that's a wonderful example. But we're striving not to have incredibly long episodes. By the time you see this one, you will have seen that edit that I put up from the coast. That was roughly 4.5 hours long when I got it out of the editing software a few days ago from the time of this recording. You'll more than likely see this after the holidays have ended. There's a couple things in between this. So a few shows at least in between this. So we're striving for shows that are not very long.
It's not. I always joke. I said those aren't really shows. That's like you putting together the slideshow of our vacation and some of the things we did. Right. It's like everyone's there going, "Oh my God, when will this ever end?" So again, he likes to put up when we go on travels, and we may do clips here and there, but it's good because it's there also, to remind you of our trip. Mm-hmm. So
I just heard Isaac go, "Please God, make this happen."
Exactly. So I haven't looked at them. I was there, whatever, and whatever. So again, I'm just telling you, I know I know it's our trip, but I'm not saying, you
And
should be spending 5 hours looking at it.
can you also build up, also to go into the download section for a minute? You saw on our Patreon where we did the false sense of urgency, the true sense of urgency, true downloads, false downloads. And we talked when we had those 4 discussions that were on there. Can your brain go into like an autonomic function to where the downloads never stop and it becomes almost like an OCD habitual, like almost like an addictive, type of quality? Yes, and that's where also the whole download thing goes out of control, and the brain chemistry and the energy go in this weird subconscious pattern. Monks use this for the good to keep themselves in a balanced, peaceful way. I always say you can put the defense up in the same way and have your subconscious run, or subconscious and unconscious run those mantras in the background. Even the law of one works in that respect. Having a shield come on, having your health stay in order in that way in the subconscious. Perfect. That's a form of meditation. When it goes over into the overbloated ego, where it can be loose, or if it becomes unbalanced, like a continuous stream of downloads that the brain is not ready to always receive, or if it's an implant and or AI trying to stimulate, or looshing, or trying to cause a looshing, or telepathic activity, trying to stimulate that constantly, it can go out of control until it is made to level, mantle, and bounce. So, and stay in that balance. So that's something that I also have to work on. It can go and just go off on a tangent and then stay here. I want it here. It doesn't always stay here, folks. It's actually, there's a lot of work put into that. Just like when I go to the chiropractor and they had to tell my muscle memory and my back to stay in, it took over a year and a bit or more to get that muscle memory to stay. The same thing going like when I get massages done or have my neck put back in or something like that. It's now staying because now it has been told, hey, this is the way you're supposed to look. And that's how you have to work on it in the other energetic respect and the mental respect as well. So I'm going to see Isaac. I would assume, based on the please God make this end comment, you're going to be the one talking. Maybe. Okay. Yeah. No, this is a meaning that what he was trying to get at was that was actually a line from the show Gutfeld, where they kept repeating the COVID nonsense over and over again ad nauseum. He's telling me to shut up. It's being repeated too much. That's essentially what he's trying to tell me. So he says it in very few words. So as should be. Okay, let's see. Balance in that too. Yes, I know. Otherwise, it is also an ego response where it has to be. Okay. At that point, you're an advertiser. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's see. All right. Are you sure that you're the only one? There's like a whole group here. Yeah. There's like Soul Family. There's like.
Because we call them in. I mean,
Yeah.
you can tell it's way different than what it was before.
Oh yeah, when we first started, man, it was like the jellyfish attachments were raining down like rain, essentially. So it was annoying. So as much as we try to improve, we were still getting crap pelted at the house at the last second because they didn't want this conversation taking place.
For many people, when we do that, I think you can feel the energy coming towards you. For some people, it makes them quite emotional just to hear that or be a part of that. But if you're able to feel it like that, and if for some reason it's overwhelming and it makes you cry, that's not a bad thing.
No,
It's actually, and especially if you're in agreement and it's what you want. What you need to do if you're feeling that is really embrace the feeling of what it feels like, because you as well as now asked your soul family no conflicting agenda. You yourself have asked for benevolence and support. You yourself have asked for other things to push away. So if it makes you cry, you're actually letting go of some of the energies maybe pent up in you that are not actually right now for your highest good, that you're all stressed and you're releasing some of that and let it go. What you want to do is try to take a second to remember the frequency that you're at. Remember how it feels, because the goal is for you to, for all of us to be able to shift ourselves into that more, I don't know if I should call it protective energies, but the energies that are more conducive for you and where you will be able to be more of your genuine, authentic self without a horrific ego, let's say fear or whatever, you know. And again, I know Isaac can talk about it, but just try to remember, if you do feel that, then try to remember what that frequency feels like, because in practice trying to get into that zone and everything, because it really will help you shed things and energies that are not necessarily good for you.
And also, he's clarifying as to the current thing I'm working on. That was an ego response, because I thought the reason this person got sick was because this person contacted us working on some of our projects. And he goes, that's only half true. So the rest was overbloated ego hurt response sort of thing. So, okay, that he was just saying that. Yeah, that. So, all right. All right, let's see here. Through the crystal, please. Yes, technically through the crystal, you're still using my brain. I understand. All right. He goes, yeah, you see how anal the cerebral response is when you start describing every detail? Yes. He goes, that's like describing the punchline of a joke. So, okay. Yes, this is indeed true. You can be extremely hurt if, of course, you are believing every little nuance is because of some of the targeting issues or of some of the issues that they experienced before the show, which 50% of it, I will not lie, of the current situation is indeed true. That is indeed in play. I cannot lie to that. The other is them trying to co-create more of the belief in that being the totality and 100% of totality of a situation. That is also a negative ego or egocentric response. Very much like, again, in your Doctor Strange, where they kept saying he was always thinking about him. That is the crux of this. Yes, you think of other people, but there is a good form of what you would call selfishness, where you take care of yourself and your own shit and your own shadow work and all of that above. That is still true, and that still holds. The bad side is when you allow yourself to become over bloated and not just seeing yourself better. You can be more knowledgeable about a subject and say you're more knowledgeable. Nowadays, people are saying you're either arrogant, racist, or egocentric by saying you have more knowledge about the 2020 revelation. Let's just say they're calling it an ego response, but in fact, it on their end, that is a programming response. You see the difference here. Yeah, and this your previous discussion that you had on your Patreon was quite enlightening, and it is still accurate and still holds. This is just a continuation of that. The back doors that he has had periodically, off and on, either in your own personal timeline, say a particular event, which was what the notebooks were also marking, different time-stamped events, and also different places, times where you were hijacked that something can go back to in your personal timeline. Very much like he rewrites past lives to anchor to a different timeline. They do the same, but in reverse of what he's doing. They try to hijack it and make it worse, create a narrative in the head, making a memory that was far worse. So therefore, the effects from further back would trickle to now and be much greater. Very much like if you were altering history, going back back to the past and altering someone's past. This is essentially like in Doctor Who, where there were 3 doctors and one had a wand that they were reprogramming, and by the time it was done, it reached the doctor that was hundreds of years older. That was mostly in a single moment in time, because there were 3 of them. Also introducing that power of 3 in the geometry at the time. This is what is being presented here. They're literally reaching into your timeline and trying to alter things. Another thing is essentially egocentric coercion, which in fact, they're giving you an overbloated sense of confidence or an overbloated sense of hurt. You are taking something too personal, or you are being overly confident about something to the point that you do not watch your six, as it were, then you are not accounting for the hack that could get into your mind. The same way that they're playing a narrative out and you have to cap that, as you've said in the past, and not let them co-create that and close that circle. You have to know if a certain attitude, either if you're too overly hurt or too extremely overly confident. Well, it's like if you were to walk, as he's like to say, into Chernobyl without any clothes on. You would be a moron to do something like that. There comes a time where you have to be sensible. That's where the brain comes in. The heart will always be extremely confident and extremely, amicable to certain situations, but also can be extremely hurt when it is open, when you are offering this. The mind can also not only be a grounding rod, but can be incredibly manipulated to generate narratives. So both being manipulated at once can be very dangerous. Both in balance can be dangerous to the bad guys. This is why they do the manipulating, you see. It's to basically fight yourself. So I can go into questions now.
So I'm hoping by now in this conversation that everybody has a pretty good idea of what we're trying to communicate for them to look at in their lives. So what I want to do is kind of also then give people a picture of what it may look like when you're dealing with it, when you're putting it in check, when you're not becoming as vulnerable. Because in a sense, if your ego response, right, has been out of control, right, and you're not realizing that you're leading an ego-driven life, again, being an overbloated side, or a fearful, my feelings are hurt side, both of which again are how, if you're leading your life always responding to that, let's say, your life, when you're not doing that, it's going to look totally different and going to feel totally different. And how you move within life, what you have around you potentially is going to change. So the reason I say that is because a lot of things that we've talked about in the past come into play here, I believe. Things like decluttering and getting rid of things really that don't serve you. Because if you're actually holding on to certain objects that do nothing but take you back to a particular period of time where a big feeling was hurt, right? That keeps reopening up a vulnerability in you anyway. So what I wanted to try and get your perspective on is how life will begin to change for you as you work on these problems, and what are some of the things that you may do. Because when you try to move from an ego-driven life to a soul, let's say a soul-driven life, I don't know the other one, and get into some of that balance, then it's almost like, okay, I don't know any other way to say this, you may have better words. It's like a reset, a complete reset and in your life of how you choose now to function. So I want to talk about that, because again, changing yourself and changing your dynamics could also be quite confusing, where you feel you're losing yourself, but you're actually finding yourself.
Yes, you're getting rid of what doesn't serve. So your mind and your body and your soul are attempting to fill in those missing spaces. Now, say if you were possessed for a long period of time and an entity is detached from you, you will feel a void or an empty space. This can be very, very similar, especially with clutter, because different entities and ghouls will conglomerate and clutter, and certain objects, as you guys have well figured out in recent days. What your life looks like when you declutter, and also you declutter the self, is you'll have far less of those intrusions, unless it's overage, of course. That's when they're assholes and dickheads, aside from what they were doing before, which was essentially the same. But your life will actually, he always says in sessions, something in the future has changed. Meaning what he's sensing is you change the dynamic here, and it begins to open things up as you progress. The New Age movement likes to say there's no such thing as time. And that's not always necessarily true, because you are living it. Yes, time is fluid and time is all as one. But there's also the way you perceive things is, and it's not as from this high spirit level. You are human, you are grounded here. So of course you have to perceive these things. You will see things even from moment to moment begin to open up, just like you feel the energies open up. You'll see situations open up. Now, can I promise that other people will start to view you better, like what your New Age movement likes to say? Oh, you'll gravitate towards you some of these happier energies because you're happy. No, they had that wrong, folks. The law of attraction is not what it's cracked up to be in this. That is a very, very overbloated, egocentric response. That is an arrogant response, saying you will automatically have this. You have to manifest that. It is not going to be a prerequisite. It is not a universal prerequisite. That's where the secret had this wrong. I will explain. You say you have a faster moving frequency. What happens? It's basically like a damned if you do, damned if you don't, according to that philosophy. Oh, you attract good, but you also attract things trying to smother it. So when does the protection come in exactly? When does the co-creation of not having the negativity come to you happen? You see, that's where that was not explained. That was basically the warning, not having the warnings before the spells, as you guys like to say, to keep phrasing the term. Whereas you were not shown how to protect against not co-creating, having that around. Somebody in the yield wanted you to see, accept both abuse and the good. This was not only a naive response, this was an ego response saying it would always automatically be handled. You have to co-create that not only within the mind, but in the heart and the soul, ground that manifestation and make sure you walk it. They're basically trying to say there was no work beyond just shedding certain layers. Wrong. You have to basically not only change that dynamic of your timeline, but you also have to see and believe and feel and know that you're not going to have any interlopers. Now, are there going to possibly be some overages? Yes. Are there going to be some universal things that maybe your oversoul still has to work out? Oh, yes, the journey continues. It does not automatically get poofed and changed overnight. There are some very few exceptions to that rule. The instant pudding mentality is an overbloated ego response, I might add as well. Yes, I get why it exists, the over gratification thing, instant gratification. I get it. There are some bits of interference, but in this, say you do make a correction in your energy. Say you make a massive one. Say a few things do change immediately. Yeah, there. This was because it was part of that energy attachment, that specific bit of change that was more close to being resolved. It was actually close to you being resolved. That's why it looked like it was in an instant. Sometimes it's anchored in a different dimension that's faster moving, and it comes here very much like the attachments are coming from a layer. You see, he was whining about where they came from. This is where they come from. Sometimes they're in a layer that time is moving much faster, and it's like boom, 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 boom. You had your Voyager episode that showed that a planet moving faster time and advancing quicker. That's in some cases, certain multiversal timelines are this way. This is where some of these void creatures are appearing from or being pulled through the void dimension to here by cultures such as this and that. This also, when you have an issue that is close to resolve, of course, it will seem like it is closer, and it'll seem like it was done like that, because it was already building up to the point of its point of resolution. So it seems like, from a human perspective, that it's instant pudding. And people have gotten into that egocentric mindset where they all have to be that way. And that is severely incorrect. It's where you're coming up to those points in time where you are coming to the points of resolution. You just happen to be approaching one that was getting ready to have a glass ceiling break, as you two like to say. It was already approaching this. And it was its starting point was quite a while ago. This is what people need to perceive this in. So to recap, the instant pudding, instant gratification of the whole secret or law of attraction isn't necessarily always true. It's how you build that manifestation. Can you put it on autonomic and make that manifestation continue? Absolutely so, but it is not like that.
So it's interesting because again, you're talking about, again, that great word that I think we have misunderstood, which is LOVE, love, because really the concept of love is what do you want to interact with, not, again, it's just being washed upon you, which I think is what you're actually saying, the difference between something just being washed upon you, you don't have to do anything about it, and a choice of the soul to make an interaction with something to make it happen. So it's like if you like to be joyful, let's say, if you love it, if you love the feeling, then I suggest you do more things that bring you that joy instead of waiting for it to just magically wash upon you, because it's not going to work that way. You have to be invested. Your creative skills and your interacting with things is what will give, cause the joy of whatever it is. It could be a hobby. It could be something, that you just enjoy to do. But if you just sit around waiting for the right moment to bring that into your life, right, it may not happen at all that way. You have to invest your own personal energies into creating these things happening. I really do think over the last few years, there's been such an effort to segregate people from one another, to get people to be at home by themselves, to then put people in fear not to go out, to do all of this stuff, that they truly have squashed a lot of people's joy, let's say, just for that one simple area. And you've got to find your way back out to recreate it. I hate to tell you that it's not coming to your door, that you have to actually move out and do what you need to do to recreate it. Now, you may be in a post-traumatic stress situation where, again, it's going to be a slower build up to getting you back out into being joyful and doing joyful things. But don't think you can't do it. The one thing about, I think, as we grow through, and again, always correct me if you have another viewpoint, that we basically, as we learn and grow, it's not that, again, there's going to be, well, we're all floating on the cloud, but you're going to gain the wisdom and the skill to be able to deal with, once you get through a glass ceiling of a big, pretty epiphany, I think, of boom, I've acquired something, then you actually may face other challenges, but you move through them quicker and faster because you've gained the wisdom and the knowledge of how to do that. Because we can either choose to roll around in the mud pit for a long, agonizing over something and drama over something, or we can just deal with it and move on. The goal is that our skills get better, that we deal with it and move on even quicker than what we did before. And that in and of itself should bring you joy, right? Not that, again, as you're saying, it's going to be instant putting poof, that we're at this place of, kumbaya, peace and harmony.
Yes, they're trying to keep you again at the beginning of that journey so that you never think that that part of the cycle is ending. Like you said, buzzkill or killjoy, however you want to put it, this is their speciality. This does not mean that you must always stay in this particular time frame. Even dark magicians, everything will try to keep you in this. Or if you walk through a certain moment of time where you were heavily attacked, they will try to keep you in this. It's good to know your past because you remember from it. It's good to know history. History cannot disappear. That is also a misnomer. They're trying to erase certain aspects of history. I won't go completely into that. They're thinking by erasing this in their own little twisted minds that they're undoing hundreds of years of certain factual and fictitious oppression. When in fact, some of them are doing the oppression. That is the bad side of this. What I'm trying to say is where somebody gets locked into this and it never ends and it becomes jittery, very much like he was saying in the Star Trek program about someone out of time becoming all messed up, or a psychosis. That is actually more of a frequency clash. So there are a temporal clash or a temporal psychosis. They put it into a disorder format in the show, but you can understand what I'm saying. Whereas it always pulls you back, not allowing that cycle to come to a completion. Now, are there others? Yes. But you must understand that when you approach this, again, It's happened for many years already. As Ragnar said in one of your previous recordings, where it's a continuous like the earth changes, where a continuous process. It's not all this big boom out in front. It's the same with the personal growth. It is exactly the same, where it's a continuous process of changing, shedding, getting rid of what doesn't serve and keeping what does. It is a constant movement, like a river constantly move. Does it stop and then get stopped up unless somebody does that? No. It's a continuous flowing. The earth evolution is continuous flowing. People evolving is continuously flowing. So saying, okay, this should have been resolved years ago. No, not necessarily. So you cannot stay in the shoulda, could, woulda, coulda, shoulda, what ifs, because that's where the enemy likes to permeate your thoughts, in the regret side of things. Now, am I saying you shouldn't feel healthy regret and guilt for a bit of the time if you've actually done something wrong and trying to make up for it? Yes, but don't fall totally and completely into that, or the cycle also will not complete. It will constantly be rehashed, put on record, skipped, and loosed. Very much like he was saying about the alien and the bashing up against the window. Quick, yes. Prolonged, bad. We are not saying that you shouldn't feel. I shouldn't say that you shouldn't feel certain things. That is wrong. But when it locks you into another time frame, you're thinking, "Oh, this should be resolved. Somebody else should be resolving this." In certain situations, absolutely. In the one he was mentioning, should there have been? And now I'm saying it. Should there have been some more of an intervention in a certain specific area? Yes, because there was a ton of overage. Not that there wasn't inner work being done by that person and yourselves. This is why overage is so nasty, because it's on top of all of those things. It's the icing on the cake you did not want, or the gravy you did not want on the meal. That's essentially it. Or the oversalting of a steak or something like that. This is wrong. It sours the situation and creates more karmic and PTSD energies. Worthless as far as I'm concerned. What I'm stating is the continuous flow must be allowed to continue to flow. Then and only then does that future open up. When you start getting rid of the physical objects that don't serve, you're at this very same time, guess what you're doing? You're doing the inner work, because you're not seeing value in that thing any longer that you had invested so much energy into. I'm not saying not be happy or joyful over things. I'm not saying don't feel love or sentimentality over things. But that can be inverted to where you are a slave to an object, enslaved by its burden, very much like he was to the notebooks after a while. Moments in time, remember, mark, timestamp. At that point, then it must be shed, no matter how you feel about it. At that point, when you are a slave to something, oh, this must be this way, because it always has been. You have now become a slave to it, and when it gets to that level, you must part with this, as he said in past programs. If it is that difficult to part with, it then must be.
So a lot of good things there to think about. The only last thing that I want to talk about, and I'm going to let you take this out, Isaac, with any last thoughts along with this, because again, we'll try to not go too far over time, is the fact of what does, when I am feeling, and we've said this before, that when you make these changes internally, you could almost feel a little blank, like a little empty, like you're so used to all of that drama, you're so used to this, that, and the other, that all of a sudden, as you clear it, it's scary for some people to have that feeling, to have a little bit of emptiness, because they're not used to having time that they actually could just sit for a little bit and or rest if you just needed to, that it feels so abnormal. But in a perspective, what you're doing again is that you're clearing out things, and you have, let's call it, this internal space where you may not even be thinking of anything. And if you're there, I want to applaud you, because you've done so much work. But what does that mean? It means now you have the ability to create
You have the space now to create and to explore what you do want to potentially bring into your life. So I just wanted to say that. I wanted you to comment, and then please just take it out with anything you have to say.
Just like what you said with some of your past works, for instance, certain old projects, let's just say, that now don't seem to hold the same meaning. There's almost like a void or an emptiness there. Or if you've cleared something, it's no different than what he discovered in his Witcher game, where there was an entity on a guy and the guy felt the same exact feelings. This is exactly what is going on. When you're clearing these things, there is a silence, which is what you want. It opens that up to fill it with new and more wonderful things. And this is why some of your old projects, you see, have had such a weird stigma behind, because it was a project that you had a particular vision on. Now, certain things have been resolved and the energies have changed and have widened, and that older template or older format no longer applies. It's not even close to what it was. So trying to force yourself, to force the creativity back to a particular thing is useless. It's futile at that point. It has evolved and changed because you have evolved and changed your perspectives and perceptions on particular subjects, such as some of your books, such as you made that show From the Fall to Lifting. Brilliant. That is exactly what this subject is about. Things of that nature, where you are saying how this information evolved and how you could not have that in play anymore. Great and wonderful thing. The emptiness feeling is very much like if somebody's playing a video game and they beat it and they've invested a bunch of emotional time into it all the way up to the end, say it has a good story, all this, or a show, and then all of a sudden they're just sitting there going, huh, okay, yeah. It's kind of like that, with creativity, because that was built with creativity as well. And people have been invested emotionally into it and energetically into it and physically into it at times, interactively. This is exactly what you're doing with creativity. It's the same thing, where you cleared something out that doesn't serve, and all of a sudden you'll feel that feeling. When that occurs, your energetics, your mental state, and your heart, all this are kind of recombobulating. This is also how some people feel after a long relationship breaks up, or if they've just started a new one, or if they start a new friendship, new business, or if something collapses and they have to, like a business, and they have to recombobulate it a little bit. The format changes very much like your Galactic Interstellar Council. The changing of the guard and the changing of those energies were inevitable, because it started out one way that didn't completely apply. Now it had to morph and change. And there's now been this odd, kind of weird limbo feeling period. It's because that creative spark is actually expanding into a different area, which is what's needed. You see the point now in this, everybody that is talking, and it's not that you've lost your creative spark. In some cases, yes, it is being stifled by external sources. But in this case, if you feel that weird, wait a minute, this doesn't jive anymore, you may not have lost something. You may have gained a greater perspective, or you've been hit one too many times and have to rekindle that pilot light. Just know it's never totally gone. It just needs to reformat into a different area. It's and also the same goes with soul missions, where the soul doesn't always accomplish everything on the list, as you've said before, but at the same time, as dear Jeffrey Hunter said in a couple of occasions when he came through, but at the same time, you must then allow yourself to go into a more expanded area of that creative vocation. And not only that, honoring the manifestation that you started out with, what still applies, keeping what still applies, but then expanding it into these other areas. Don't be so stringent. Now, staying in your dream, of course, yes. Living that, yes. But at the same time, what you start out as that manifestation may expand into other areas. That's where that weird limbo-like state is, as you're not only healing from the trauma of not only having to get rid of, say, something sentimental, but at the same point in time, you are having to fill those missing spaces with more creative pursuits. This is why there was that scene, and I'll use a Doctor Who reference, where that dog man wanted an object as payment for whatever products they had, which were carts and vehicles and stuff like that, with an object that meant that sentimentality. That's why that being wanted, that trait, and also the Canis species work on that particular vocational value as well, where it has to have some kind of value in that area. Not always, because they can be used car salesmen. I'm just saying that in some of their little pockets of people, they will act like that dog man did in that segment of the show, where they wanted something that meant something, because that meant also you were evolving and moving forward. That's what the writer was trying to get at with that. They wanted that something that meant something, not just something every day. It had to have an energetic value, sentimental value, and also the physical value as well. That's how some of them operate. The rest, like I said, are kind of used car salesmen, but there are those amongst them that operate within that particular set of energetics. And from that point forward, then you can move forward. It's like, say, if you got rid of an object that had that sentimentality, you kind of have that weird limbo. It's because you are regrounding and resituating to go into something else more creative. That's where that comes from. So I will end this here. Just know that this is sometimes holding on to some of these things is an ego response, because you are also trying to honor a past family member in some fashion, or if they ask that you hold on to something, which is also an ego response on their part, a bad one. It is you're continuing that virus in DNA if it's a family thing. Sometimes it becomes the embodiment of that. Sometimes you can retool that item, be something better, but and be historical and be very, very good as far as telling a certain fable, history, tale, saga, however you want to say it in your genetic history. When it becomes flipped is when it is forced and when it is not allowed to evolve. That's the overbloated ego. It becomes a backdoor, it becomes a weakness, and you get into a record skip of a cycle, wash, rinse, and repeat, and it becomes the embodiment of the virus. So I will leave this here. Thank you, all of you. Ugh. All right. Yeah, that was actually good, and we didn't go too much over. So I think we're doing pretty good so far. This has been a fascinating conversation. I think it's been well said. So I don't think there's too much more to add. I did write an affirmation and blessing. This was going to be in the beginning, but we've been encouraged to use the law of one to start off the conversations, because it sets the platform and stage, like we did at one of the psychic fairs. We had the law of one used, and it opened up the whole building and room. And when it wasn't used, you could tell the inverted version of that, where it didn't quite mesh right. So where we'll try to use that to start out shows from this point forward in some form or fashion. You can tool it how you want. The last affirmation and blessing is: the ego is both the will to survive and the will to do better. Do better, be better. Just don't feel you are better than others. That is the darker ego at play. So that is where I would like to leave it. And I know you want to leave it here. I don't know if you have anything else. Okay.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope it gives you something to think about. And we look forward to having another talk with you later.
Okay. Thank everybody for watching this episode. And go to galacticinterstellarcouncil.com, subscribe to our galactic history material. So bye-bye, everybody.